Welcome back to her Fireside Stories. You smell like a hospital. Don't sit on our new couch. That's what my son in law said to me without blinking, without shame. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. But no, he meant it. And my daughter, she heard it too. She just looked down, adjusting a throw pillow, like I hadn't been humiliated in her living room. My name is Iris. I'm a widow, a mother, and once upon a time, I believed love and sacrifice would always earn me a place at the table, especially in my daughter's home. I paid off their mortgage thinking I was giving her a gift. What I didn't realize was that I'd also made myself disposable. This is the story of how I lost my seat in the house I helped build and how I found my strength in the silence that followed. I felt my heart clench the instant my son-in-law, Malcolm, leaned in with a disgusted curl of his lip and said, "You smell like a hospital. Don't sit on our new couch." At first, I wanted to laugh as if it were some ridiculous joke, but his eyes were as cold and serious as the polished tiles under my feet. That simple, callous remark cut deeper than any raw insult I'd ever known. In an instant, I felt my entire identity shift, like I was no longer the proud and supportive mother who had sacrificed so much, but rather an inconvenient intruder in my own family's life. My name is Iris, and I wear my short silver hair in a neat bob that frames my face. I used to joke that I'd cut it this way because life is too short for messy tangles, but that day, it all felt like a poor excuse. Standing there in my daughter's freshly decorated living room, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the window. My eyes betrayed how I felt a surge of humiliation, anger, and heartbreak. How had it come to this? Once upon a time, I believed that if I loved generously and gave selflessly, my child and her husband would treat me with respect. I believed that was the natural order of things. After all, I had poured my time, heart, and bank account into making sure they never had to struggle the way I did in my youth. I glanced over at my daughter, Aurelia, her sleek ponytail swaying as she fussed with a decorative pillow on that brand new cream sofa. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She knew what he had said. She'd heard him, but in that moment, she remained perfectly painfully silent. It was as though she were desperately hoping to quell any confrontation by focusing on the color-coordinated throw pillows and adjusting them in symmetrical lines. Her refusal to defend me was the worst part. I thought of my late husband Randall then, how he would have shaken his head in disbelief if he'd seen our family stooping this low. We'd promised each other we'd raise Aurelia to be strong, compassionate, loyal to family, and yet I was being treated like contaminated waste. When did it all begin to unravel? Perhaps it was the day I decided to pay off the remainder of Aurelia and Malcolm's mortgage. I had walked into the bank proud as a peacock, believing I was doing something meaningful and lasting for my daughter's happiness. I wanted nothing more than to see Aurelia thrive in a stable home with no monthly payments looming over her future. Their house was modest enough, a single story with a cozy front yard and wide windows that let in bright, natural light. I'd fantasized about seeing grandkids run across its hardwood floors, about visiting for dinner and hearing laughter bounce from room to room. Little did I know that my generosity would come to be used against me, twisted into some kind of leverage. In the beginning, Malcolm was all smiles. He'd brag to his friends about how lucky he was to have a mother-in-law who could provide such extravagant support. Aurelia would hug me tight, her eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. I thought I was forging a deeper connection, a permanent place in their hearts. But somewhere along the line, after I'd handed over that final check, something changed. The phone calls from Aurelia became more infrequent. The invitations to Sunday lunch trickled away. I'd call only to be given excuses. "Malcolm's busy," or "We're heading out, maybe next week." Soon I was left to watch from a distance, receiving the occasional update through social media. They got new furniture. They traveled to the countryside for a weekend getaway. They dined at upscale restaurants. None of it included me, and the sense of exclusion ballooned until it felt almost suffocating. When I did show up always by my own accord, Malcolm's greetings turned from polite pleasantries into curt nods, then into near hostile coldness. Aurelia had grown quieter, her eyes darting around with guilt or anxiety. Whenever I visited, I didn't understand what was happening, but the emotional chill in the air was unmistakable. The tension lay thick in the living room, and with each of my visits, it only seemed to grow more pronounced. I never imagined it would escalate to Malcolm outright insulting me. After that day, the hospital smell remark, my life changed in small but significant ways. I remember going home to my own neat little cottage in disbelief. The place felt emptier than ever. I ran a hand over my short silver bob, wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I'd said or done anything to provoke such cruelty. Rationally, I knew I hadn't, but my heart refused to settle. My mind buzzed with questions. Had I overstepped by paying off their house? Did Malcolm resent having a financial obligation to me or felt overshadowed by my gesture? In the quiet of my bedroom, I gazed at the wedding photo of Randall and me, both of us beaming so hopeful for the future. Randall's light brown hair was combed back neatly, and I remembered how I used to fuss over styling it just right. He'd been gone for a year, taken by a sudden heart attack that left a void not even time could fill. Since his passing, I'd thrown myself into Aurelia's life, thinking it would somehow keep me tethered to the warmth of family. But now, instead of comfort, there was a deep, throbbing ache. The man I'd welcomed into my family like a son had turned into a stone wall of indifference and beyond that of contempt. The betrayal cut through me like ice water. Even Aurelia's stance that day, her averted gaze haunted me. I'd pinned my hopes on her empathy and love. How could she stand by and let Malcolm speak to me like that? Night after night, sleep evaded me. I'd wander the house feeling the lonely echo of my own footsteps. My phone stayed silent. Not a single call from Aurelia to check if I was all right, to apologize, or even to explain. It was as if they'd put me on a shelf labeled inconvenient. Perhaps in their minds, the checks I wrote, the advice I gave, all came at too high a price. My presence. One evening, as I stood by the window, arms wrapped around myself, a startling realization struck me. I was done being a doormat. Done allowing people I loved to treat me as disposable. Determined to reclaim my self-respect, I turned my attention inward. For too long, I'd allowed my happiness to hinge on whether Aurelia and Malcolm accepted me. I decided enough was enough. If they weren't going to welcome me, I wouldn't force my way into their lives. I had the power to choose how I spent my days, how I allocated my resources, and whom I lavished my love upon. But that realization didn't fill the emptiness right away. Instead, it revealed a vast chasm of disappointment, the kind that tugged at me first thing in the morning and lulled me to an uneasy sleep at night. I needed an outlet, something constructive to focus on. So I began volunteering at a local community center, sharing a skill I'd honed over the years. Crocheting my crocheted blankets, scarves, and hats became small tokens of warmth for the shelter. There, among people who appreciated the simplest kindness, I found a semblance of peace. Still, Malcolm's words and Aurelia's silence lingered in my mind. Occasionally, I'd catch sight of them around town, pulling up at the supermarket, dining at the cafe across Main Street. My heart would flutter with both anger and sadness. If Aurelia spotted me, she'd do a quick wave and muster a thin smile, but we never exchanged words in public, not anymore. The real challenge came when monthly bills for the house arrived in my mailbox by mistake. Because the mortgage was in my name, albeit paid off, certain documents still circled back to me. The first time it happened, I realized that in a purely legal sense, I still held significant power over that property. I pondered it silently, aware of the potential leverage in my hands, but at the same time, it felt wrong to use a house. Aurelia's family home as a tool for retaliation. Days turned into weeks, and the tension weighed like an unspoken threat. Part of me wanted to walk up to their door, demand an explanation, yet the bigger part of me was tired of trying to fix relationships that others seemed content to destroy, tired of giving when no one offered anything back, not even courtesy. I was stuck at a crossroads to walk away or to fight for my dignity. The answer to that question arrived unexpectedly in the form of a friend of mine, Miriam. She was a retired paralegal with a sharp mind and a flair for justice, wearing her ash blonde hair in a short, stylish cut that belied her age. Over coffee, I confided in her. Everything that had transpired, Miriam was a good listener. She tapped her fingers on the cafe table, brows knitted in concern, and finally said, "Iris, if they won't respect you for your kindness, they might have to respect you for your boundaries." Boundaries. That word resonated through me like a thunderclap. I'd spent my life giving everything I had first to Randall, then to Aurelia and Malcolm. Forgetting I had the right to say no, I was so busy ensuring the people I loved were cared for that I overlooked my own emotional well-being. My fear was that setting boundaries could be taken as aggression. Yet was it really aggression to stand firm for my own sense of self-worth? That night, I rummaged through old files until I found the deed and related papers to Aurelia's house. My name was on it. I was fully entitled to certain decisions regarding that property. But what kind of mother evicts her own daughter? The thought made me recoil. I didn't want a melodramatic showdown. I wanted accountability. If Malcolm continued to treat me like a pariah, something had to give. Shortly after I made my first move, I stopped paying for repairs and upkeep that Malcolm deemed my motherly duty. A minor crack in their driveway. Not my problem, weeds sprouting in the front yard. My back wouldn't bend for that anymore. And if Malcolm wanted to replace the living room curtains with imported drapes, he'd have to foot the bill himself. Subtle as it was, my newfound stance rippled through their household. Aurelia texted me once a tentative message. "Mom, are you okay? Malcolm says we need some funds for updates. Are you cutting us off?" I resisted the urge to respond immediately. I read her words again, analyzing the underlying expectation. Cutting them off, or simply drawing a line. Eventually, I typed a short reply. "I'm fine. From now on, I won't be covering extra house expenses. You and Malcolm can handle them." Hitting send felt like I'd just climbed a mountain. My heart pounded, but there was also relief in asserting my decision. That was the moment I realized love doesn't mean unconditional subservience, especially not when faced with blatant disrespect. For days, I heard nothing back. Aurelia's silence was deafening, but so was Malcolm's. A few times, I wondered if they'd show up at my doorstep, outraged and demanding an explanation. Yet there were no calls, no knocks at the door. Perhaps they were too proud to admit they'd relied on me. Maybe Malcolm was seething at the notion that I was no longer in his financial pocket. Either way, the hush that followed was a testament to how transactional our relationship had become. I took that silence as permission to invest my energy elsewhere. My crocheting classes expanded from a handful of attendees to nearly 30 at the community center. I poured my heart into every lesson. We had older folks making blankets for newborns, younger moms learning to stitch scarves for their toddlers, and a few teenagers discovering the joy of crafting something by hand. It became a small sanctuary where my generosity was appreciated, not taken for granted. Yet I couldn't deny the pang of longing whenever I saw a family in the supermarket. Children tugging at their mother's coat, laughter in the cereal aisle. My granddaughter Justine was growing up without me around as much. She was only 7, but bright as the sun with curly chestnut hair. I'd meant to be part of her daily life. I had envisioned the joy of picking her up from school occasionally, of teaching her how to crochet tiny hats for her dolls. Now that dream floated far in the distance. Still, I held firm, because for every day that went by, for every sigh of loneliness, I reminded myself that respect is a two-way street. If Aurelia and Malcolm couldn't grant me the simplest courtesy, I wouldn't sacrifice my dignity for their comfort. If you're finding this story gripping and want to see how it all unfolds, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and drop a comment sharing where you're reading from. Your support means a lot. It was around this time I started hearing rumors through mutual acquaintances. Small tidbits of gossip reached my ears. Malcolm had been complaining about me to his friends, painting me as some controlling mother-in-law who used her wealth to meddle in their affairs. One person mentioned overhearing Malcolm brag that he put me in my place and that I was getting too old to be meddling in grown folks' business. Instead of anger, I found myself filled with a strange pity. He was so insecure that he needed to tear me down to feel powerful. How had Aurelia become blind to that? Or was she simply numb? Convinced that love meant enduring his callousness, I decided to bite the bullet and try to talk to Aurelia one last time. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't fully aware of how dire the situation was. I called her a half-dozen rings passing before she finally picked up. Her greeting was guarded and uneasy. "Hi, Mom," full of tension. I started gently telling her I missed her. "Missed Justine." She responded with short murmurs of acknowledgement, as though she were distracted or worried about Malcolm overhearing. Finally, I gathered the courage to address the elephant in the room. "Aurelia, I know Malcolm and I aren't on good terms, but this can't go on forever. We need to talk about where we stand." She hesitated, then let out a tired sigh. "Mom, Malcolm says you're trying to control us with money. He says we owe you nothing. And well, I don't know what to say." My heart sank. The wedge between us wasn't just in my head. Malcolm had planted and nurtured it. "Aurelia," I said as calmly as I could, "I would never do anything to harm you or Justine. Paying off your house was an act of love, not control. But it hurts deeply to be treated like an inconvenience. I don't know what Malcolm has told you, but I feel shut out, unappreciated, and honestly disrespected." Silence filled the line. Then, in a hushed tone, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. Can we talk later? I promise I'll call back." She never called back. Days stretched into a week, then two. I waited by the phone, my stomach knotting whenever it buzzed, only to discover it was just a spam call or a reminder from the dentist's office. Frustration built inside me, melding with sadness, like a slow, simmering stew. Did Aurelia really see me as an enemy now, or was she stuck in a no man's land, too afraid to stand up to her husband? When the next real estate tax notice arrived for their house, still in my name, I decided I couldn't keep avoiding the legal side of things. Even if I never planned to evict them, it made no sense for me to shoulder ongoing responsibilities when I wasn't even allowed a seat on their couch. With a heavy heart, I explored the formalities of transferring property rights, or at least adjusting them. I reached out to Miriam asking for her paralegal expertise. We met at her office downtown, a small but well-kept suite with tidy shelves of legal references. She flipped through my documents, clucking her tongue sympathetically. "Iris, if it's still in your name, you're ultimately liable. It might not be wise to give them the house outright, but you could set up a formal agreement, something that states your boundaries clearly, or even splits the deed if that's what you want." Miriam paused, lifting her gaze to me. "Are you ready for this? To let go of the last bit of leverage you have?" The question struck me. Let go. Was that what I needed to do? A part of me balked at the thought. The house wasn't just about control. It symbolized my love, my legacy, and my desire for Aurelia to have a stable life. Letting go felt like admitting defeat, like severing the final tether to my daughter. But holding on to it, especially under these circumstances, also felt toxic. Walking out of Miriam's office, I caught my reflection in the mirrored elevator doors. My short silver hair looked more tired than usual, as if reflecting the turmoil inside me. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and decided that I needed a clearer plan, a way to stand up for myself without burning every bridge to the ground. The clarity I sought arrived in the form of a desperate text message from Aurelia. Mom, please help Malcolm's furious about the taxes. He's yelling about how we can't afford to pay. Says it's your responsibility. I'm scared. Call me. My hands shook as I read those words. So this was it the moment they realized I wasn't their endless safety net anymore. A swirl of emotions overtook me. Sorrow for Aurelia's fear, anger at Malcolm's audacity, and a profound weariness that settled into my bones. He still believed I owed them. And Aurelia. She was stuck in the crossfire, possibly enabling him by not standing up for herself. My immediate instinct was to drive over there to shield her from Malcolm's rage, but I knew that if I showed up unannounced, he'd only escalate the situation. Instead, I texted Aurelia back. I understand you're scared. I will not pay the taxes. You and Malcolm have to handle your household. If you want my help, we need to talk in person, both of you. It was firm but fair. My finger hovered over the send button before I finally pressed it, my pulse thudding in my ears. Time dragged as I awaited her reply. Minutes felt like hours. Then the phone rang. I picked up. Aurelia's shaky voice greeted me laced with tears. Mom, he's gone out, I don't know where, but he was yelling and then he stormed off. I'm tired, Mom. I'm so tired. My resolve to be strong began to waver, but I steadied myself. Aurelia, you know I love you, but I can't rescue you from every crisis. If you both refuse to respect me, I'm willing to meet if Malcolm is open to it. She sniffled, exhaling shakily. I don't know if he'll ever agree, but maybe we can meet alone, just you and me. I paused, the old longing for a mother-daughter bond tugging at me. All right, I finally said. But after that, we need a meeting with Malcolm. This toxic cycle has to end. We set a time for the next day. My heart pounded with cautious optimism. Perhaps this was a sign Aurelia was ready to see reason. Our meeting took place at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, the sort of place where the sound of coffee machines and soft jazz music provided a semblance of privacy. I arrived early, claiming a corner booth. The warm aroma of roasted beans did little to calm the churning in my stomach. When Aurelia finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked weary, as though she'd aged a decade in a matter of months. Her once firm posture slumped and her neat ponytail was hastily tied, strands escaping in a messy halo. She slid into the booth across from me, eyes downcast. Mom, she said simply, tears threatening to spill over. All the resentment I'd built up over Malcolm's words and Aurelia's complicity wavered at the sight of my baby girl looking so lost. I reached out and clasped her trembling hands. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I fought the urge to unleash all my frustrations, to demand answers. Instead, I waited for her to speak first. She wiped her cheeks, inhaled shakily, and said, I'm sorry I didn't defend you when Malcolm said those awful things. I'm sorry I let him treat you that way. It's just, she trailed off, eyes darting around as if searching for the right words. It's just what I asked, gently. Not wanting to scare her into silence, her shoulders sagged. He's changed. He wasn't always like this, Mom. After you paid off the mortgage, I think, I think he felt emasculated. He started saying you were buying our loyalty, that you were trying to show him up like he couldn't provide for his own family. I know it's ridiculous, she added hastily, but it's how he sees it. The ache in my chest deepened. So that was it, Malcolm's pride, but that doesn't excuse his cruelty, I said softly. Aurelia nodded, tears streaming. Now, I know I've tried to reason with him, but he gets defensive, angry. I'm afraid I'll lose him or that he'll leave. And I just don't know what to do. I want my family together, but I can't keep watching him hurt you. My initial reaction was to tell her to cut him loose if he couldn't respect me or her. But I bit my tongue. As a widow, I understood the fear of being alone and the complexity of long-term love. Still, I wouldn't excuse Malcolm's behavior, nor could I allow Aurelia to become collateral damage. I squeezed her hands. I love you, Aurelia. You're my daughter. But your silence in the face of his words felt like betrayal. I need to know, do you believe him? Do you think I'm meddling, trying to control you? Her gaze shot up horrified. No, Mom, never. I know you only wanted to help. It was a gift from the heart. If I could pay you back, I would just to end this tension. I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't wanted them in debt to me. I'd wanted to ease their burden. How twisted that the gesture got interpreted as a power play. You don't have to pay me back. The only thing I ever wanted was basic respect and a place in your lives. She closed her eyes, tears escaping. I'm so sorry. We spent the next hour talking about my perspective about her fears, about how we might mend this fractured relationship if and only if Malcolm was willing to stop weaponizing my kindness. We agreed that Aurelia would try to set up a three-way conversation, a calm adult meeting. Yet the more she shared about his recent moods and outbursts, the more I doubted we'd have a peaceful resolution. Malcolm was apparently taking every financial stress out on Aurelia, blaming me for everything that went wrong around the house. I asked her pointedly, "Are you safe with him?" She paused too long for my liking, but finally replied, "Physically, yes, but emotionally, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." That broke my heart. No mother wants to hear her child is living in fear. As we parted, I hugged her tight, letting her tears soak my shoulder. "You're not alone," I whispered, holding back my own tears. "No matter what happens, you have me." In the days that followed, I half expected a phone call from Malcolm, or at least a text message full of accusations. None came. Instead, Aurelia texted sporadically updating me that he was thinking about meeting me. Part of me suspected he was simply stalling, hoping I'd back down, but I refused to revert to old habits. I wouldn't chase him, nor would I cower. With my newly reclaimed time and emotional bandwidth, I dug deeper into volunteer work. The crocheting classes at the community center became a haven. During a free afternoon, I decided to expand my efforts, teaching a group of senior citizens to make small blankets for the pediatric ward at the hospital. Ironically, the very place Malcolm had accused me of smelling like became a source of hope for others. Meanwhile, Aurelia confided that Malcolm was growing more resentful by the day. "He's mad you won't just let this blow over," she said in one message. "He keeps saying you're making a scene, that you only gave us the money to play hero." I tried to keep my responses calm, reminding her gently that I wasn't the one dragging this out. He was. Then one afternoon, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. I recognized the official stamp of the county courthouse. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing for some legal nightmare. Inside, I found a notice that Malcolm had challenged the property deed claiming partial ownership. My jaw dropped. The nerve of him. He was effectively trying to stake a legal claim, presumably to force my hand. If he couldn't bully me emotionally, he'd attempt to do it through the courts. I felt my blood pressure spike. The old me, eager to please, petrified of conflict, would have panicked, but the new me, battle-scarred and resolute, was strangely calm. "So this is how he wants to play it?" I muttered, slapping the papers down on the kitchen table. My mind raced. I needed to call Miriam, or maybe find a reputable real estate attorney. One thing was certain: I wasn't going to let Malcolm walk all over me, not in my life nor through the legal system. Enjoying this in-depth journey? Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, and let us know in the comments how you'd handle a similar family conflict. I wasted no time. The next morning, I set an appointment with Miriam. She greeted me in her office with a sympathetic smile and offered me a seat. I explained the situation, my voice tight with frustration. Placing the legal notice on her desk, I said, "He's trying to force a confrontation. He might even be trying to push me into signing over the house entirely. What are my options?" Miriam examined the document, her brow furrowing. Legally, he can't claim ownership without evidence of financial contribution or a valid contract. Did he contribute to the mortgage or major repairs? I shook my head vehemently. He and Aurelia covered minor utilities after I paid off the mortgage, but nothing substantial. Everything else, major renovations, big repairs, came out of my pocket. She nodded, tapping the notice with her pen. Then he has no standing. This is likely just a scare tactic. You can file a response detailing the history of payments. He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on, but the process can still be draining. Draining was an understatement. The idea of battling my son-in-law in a courtroom twisted my stomach. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes briefly. What if I propose a settlement, give Aurelia the deed, but maintain certain protective clauses, ensuring I'm not shut out of seeing my granddaughter? My voice trembled at the end. I loathed that it had come to legal strategies to keep a relationship with Justine. Miriam's expression softened. "You could do that, but be careful. If Malcolm is controlling Aurelia, a direct transfer might give him even more leverage over her. And if they divorce or separate, it complicates everything. Maybe it's time to consider what outcome you truly want. What outcome did I truly want?" Part of me wanted to wave a magic wand, restore the family harmony we'd once dreamed of. Another part of me wanted to banish Malcolm from our lives forever. But the realistic part recognized a middle ground. I wanted Aurelia to be safe and self-sufficient, and I wanted to maintain a loving relationship with her and my granddaughter, free from Malcolm's manipulations. I left Miriam's office with a folder of documents and a heavy heart bracing for whatever Malcolm would do next. That evening, Aurelia called. Her tone was subdued. "Mom, Malcolm found out you're meeting with an attorney," she began, voice shaky. "He's furious, says he'll make us all sorry if you go through with legal action." I felt my jaw tense. "He's the one who started it," I pointed out. "I know," she whispered. "I keep telling him we can settle this if we just talk calmly, but he's not listening. He says you're trying to sabotage our marriage, that you've been meddling from the start." My chest tightened. How twisted was his perception? I inhaled deeply, keeping my voice level. "Listen, Aurelia, it doesn't have to turn ugly. I'm open to discussing terms, but he has to be willing to drop this legal charade. I won't be threatened in my own family." The words felt foreign, but also liberating. I was no longer pleading or apologizing. I was stating facts. Aurelia fell silent for a long moment. "Mom, do you really think maybe it's best if we sell the house? That way the burden isn't on you anymore, and Malcolm can't claim anything." My mind reeled. I hadn't considered that. Selling the house would be final. No more illusions of me stepping foot into that living room. No more ties to the place I'd envisioned as a family hub. But if it brought peace, "I'll think about it," I managed to say. "Let's talk it through, maybe in person with an unbiased mediator. Bring Malcolm if he's willing." Aurelia didn't sound hopeful. "All right, I'll try," she murmured. There was exhaustion in her voice, and it tore at my heart. My daughter was trapped in a toxic dynamic, and I couldn't simply drag her out. As I hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand, reflecting on how drastically life can turn. A year ago, I was a doting widow, proud that I could pay off my daughter's home. Now I was tangled in a legal fight with my own son-in-law. I wondered if Randall was looking down at this mess, shaking his head in sorrow. For the first time in weeks, I let a few tears slip, letting the wave of emotion wash over me before pulling myself together again. The following days were agonizingly quiet. I continued my volunteer work, focusing on crocheting blankets for newborns at the hospital. It was oddly therapeutic. Each loop of yarn gave me a tangible sense of control in a life that felt increasingly chaotic. With every baby blanket finished, I thought about new beginnings, about hope and love untainted by betrayal. But beneath that calm surface, my mind spiraled with worry. Malcolm's next move, Aurelia's vulnerability, the looming legal dispute. I made a few more calls to real estate attorneys, each time repeating the same story, paying off my daughter's mortgage, only to face hostility. The attorneys empathized but stressed the complexities involved, especially if Aurelia was not fully supportive of me in the legal sense. Then early one morning, a knock rattled my front door. My heart jumped. Peeking through the window, I saw Aurelia standing on the porch, hair disheveled, eyes rimmed with red. I flung the door open. "Aurelia, are you okay?" She stepped inside, her composure unraveling. She looked around my quaint living room as though seeing it for the first time in ages, Mom. She whispered, voice cracking. I left him. For now, at least. My eyes widened. "What happened?" I asked, gently guiding her to the sofa. She sank into the cushions, hands trembling. He had another outburst, yelling about the lawyer, how you're turning me against him. He was pacing around the house, throwing things, calling you names. I was scared. Mom! Justine was in her room crying. I couldn't take it anymore, my heart squeezed with protective rage. Aurelia took a shaking breath. I put Justine in the car and drove off. I didn't know where else to go. We're safe, but I'm terrified he'll show up here immediately. I checked the street through the window, half expecting Malcolm's car to appear. The street was empty. "It's okay," I said, rubbing her shoulder in calming circles. "You're safe with me. We'll figure this out." It felt surreal, but also like a tiny bloom of hope. Perhaps Aurelia was finally recognizing the toxicity, yet her tear-streaked face spoke volumes of the emotional turbulence she'd endured. Within an hour, Justine was nestled on my sofa, playing with an old crochet doll I'd made years ago. She seemed quieter than I remembered her. Bright smile dimmed. I could only imagine what it was like for a child to witness her parents' conflict. Meanwhile, Aurelia sat in my kitchen sipping hot tea with trembling hands. I asked the question that weighed on my mind. "Do you want to press charges for his threats or his aggressive behavior?" She stared into her cup. "I don't know, Mom. I'm not even sure it's at that point yet. He's not physically hurting us. I just don't want Justine to keep seeing him like this." I nodded, respecting that every woman's journey through relationship turmoil was different. Still, I wanted to protect them both. "Let's at least talk to an attorney about a temporary restraining order just in case," I suggested. Gently, Aurelia didn't protest. We spent the morning planning next steps. She'd stay with me, look for a more permanent solution if things didn't improve. We'd gather important documents for Justine's school, prepare for the possibility that Aurelia might need to file for separation or even divorce. It felt overwhelming, but I sensed a new determination in my daughter. Her fear was palpable, but so was her resolve. By late afternoon, Aurelia found the courage to call Malcolm and inform him that she and Justine would not return unless he agreed to counseling among other conditions. She put the call on speakerphone, hands shaking. At first, Malcolm's voice was eerily calm. Then it escalated. He erupted in a rant about betrayal and how I was orchestrating everything behind the scenes. He blamed me for his marriage falling apart. I listened quietly, letting Aurelia handle it. She managed a firm tone, saying, "It's your behavior. Malcolm, not my mother's. I need you to take responsibility. Until then, we're staying here." He spewed a final venomous remark about me smelling like disinfectant again, and hung up. Aurelia flinched. I placed a hand over hers, feeling pride that she hadn't caved to his intimidation. That night, my once quiet home bustled with the presence of my daughter and granddaughter. I made dinner simple comfort food spaghetti with homemade marinara, and the three of us ate in relative silence. It wasn't exactly a joyful meal, but there was a semblance of solace in being together. Afterward, while Justine colored at the table, Aurelia and I talked about practicalities, Mom, she said hesitantly. "I know I should probably get a job. I've been relying on Malcolm's income and the leftover money you'd sometimes provide for groceries. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Do you think you can help me figure out a stable plan? A wave of relief washed through me. Aurelia was finally stepping into independence. Of course, I said gently. We can look at job postings. The library is always hiring part-time clerks. Or we can see what training programs are available. You graduated with a minor in business. Maybe you can find office work. She breathed out, shoulders relaxing slightly. Okay, thank you. I'll do anything to make sure Justine doesn't get caught in the middle of this mess. That mention of Justine spurred me to consider the next big question. Are you planning to send her back to school on Monday? What if Malcolm tries to pick her up without your permission? Her eyes widened. I didn't think about that. I guess I can notify the school, tell them not to release her to him unless I approve. The gravity of the situation hung in the air. As we cleaned up the kitchen, I felt a strange blend of heartbreak and hope. Heartbreak because this was not how a family was supposed to function. Hope because Aurelia was finally forging her own path. The tension that had poisoned our relationship for months might finally be dissipating, replaced by honest conversations about boundaries and respect. Before bed, I checked all the locks on the doors and windows, a habit I never used to have. I even placed a small wooden wedge under the back door, just in case I wasn't sure if Malcolm would show up. But I refused to let fear rule my home. If he came, he'd find a united front awaiting him, not a doormat. The next few days turned into a slow, careful dance of new routines. Aurelia began browsing job opportunities online, her brow knitted in determination as she sent out resumes. Justine attended school with clear instructions that only her mother or I could pick her up. I accompanied Aurelia to a family law attorney to discuss temporary custody arrangements, just in case Malcolm attempted anything drastic. Each step, while daunting, was a necessary anchor in the uncharted waters of single motherhood. Malcolm, for his part, retreated into eerie silence. No more calls, no more texts, no more legal notices arrived. On one hand, it was a relief. On the other, the quiet felt ominous. Had he given up, or was he merely regrouping for a bigger attack? Aurelia oscillated between guilt and anger. Guilt for upending her marriage, anger that she had tolerated Malcolm's behavior for so long. One evening, as we sat in the living room, she asked tentatively, "Mom, do you think people can change? Like if Malcolm agrees to therapy, do you think we could ever go back to how we were?" I mulled over the question, recalling the happiness that once filled their home. "Change is possible," I said slowly, "but it requires genuine effort and accountability. Not just words." She nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I remember when we first got married. We were so in love. He was sweet, hardworking. Then, somewhere along the way, everything shifted. I don't even know when or why." I hugged her gently. "Sometimes people lose themselves to pride, stress, envy. Sometimes they just fail to cope with life's challenges. But it's on them to fix themselves." That night after Aurelia and Justine had gone to bed, I sat in my armchair crocheting a soft pink scarf for my granddaughter. My thoughts drifted to the roller coaster we'd been on, the mortgage payoff. Malcolm's growing hostility, the humiliating smell, like hospital comment. It felt like ages ago and yet painfully fresh. Still, my heart was lighter now. Aurelia was safe under my roof, forging a plan for her life without constant fear of Malcolm's temper. I was no longer bending over backward to please a man who saw me as competition. The question remained, how would we handle Malcolm's next move? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing to our channel for more compelling narratives. Let us know in the comments what you do in Iris's shoes. Your insights could help someone else. Just as the days were beginning to feel almost normal again, the storm broke. Aurelia received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. She pressed speakerphone and we both listened. It was Malcolm. His voice sounded strained, almost frantic. "Aurelia, please pick up. I need to talk to you," he said when the voicemail kicked in. She looked at me, eyes wide. "Should I call him back?" she whispered. My gut twisted. A part of me wanted to protect her from any further interaction, but another part recognized that ignoring him might only escalate things. "Only if you feel ready," I said softly, bracing myself. She tapped the screen and put it on speaker again. Malcolm answered immediately, sounding oddly breathless. "Aurelia," he said, I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Everything spiraled out of control, and I don't want to lose you or Justine." My eyebrows shot up. So, this was the contrite side of Malcolm. We'd heard about Aurelia cleared her throat. "Malcolm, if you're really sorry, then we need to see real changes," she said. Her voice wavered, but she kept it firm. "I'm staying at Mom's until you get help, therapy, anger management, whatever it takes. And the legal stuff, you need to drop it." He let out a trembling sigh. "I'll drop everything. The lawsuit, the property claim. I swear I was just angry feeling like your mom was trying to push me out. But I realize I messed up. Please come home, Aurelia. We can talk this through." The line went quiet. Aurelia was silent for a moment, tears glinting in her eyes. "I won't bring Justine back unless I'm sure you've changed, Malcolm," she finally said. "This isn't about Mom pushing you out. This is about your behavior, telling her she smells like a hospital, berating her, shutting her out. That's all on you." He didn't argue. He sounded subdued, almost defeated. I know. I can't undo what I said, but I'm willing to do therapy. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't walk away from our marriage." Aurelia looked at me, heartache etched in her features. We both knew words were cheap without real action. Malcolm's promise to seek help opened a complicated door. Aurelia agreed to meet him in public, a neutral location, so they could discuss practical steps. I insisted on going along, not to interfere, but to stand as a silent safeguard, especially since he'd claimed he was now contrite. She chose a park in town, one with open spaces and families milling about, so she'd feel safer. We arrived on a crisp Saturday afternoon. The sun cast long shadows across the grass. Kids were laughing on the playground, and the smell of roasted peanuts wafted from a nearby vendor. Malcolm stood by the pond, hands shoved in his pockets, his short-cropped hair ruffled by the breeze. I hadn't seen him face to face since the humiliating day he told me to keep off his couch. As we approached, he gave me a brief, uncertain nod, then turned his focus to Aurelia. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. She nodded but said nothing. I stood a few paces behind, letting them take the lead. He launched into an apology, stumbling over words. "I was wrong. I felt inferior, I guess, when your mom paid off the house, like I couldn't provide, and I took it out on her and you by being hostile and arrogant." Aurelia's eyes brimmed with tears, but she remained composed. "Why didn't you just talk to me? Why blame Mom?" Malcolm rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't want to admit I felt insecure. I thought if I blamed her, I could pretend it wasn't my fault." His gaze drifted to me. "I'm sorry, Iris. I said awful things. I know you meant well." I watched him carefully, searching for sincerity in his eyes. They glistened with what could be remorse or fear of losing everything. Still, I nodded, apology accepted. "But an apology isn't enough. How do we know you'll change?" He swallowed. "I've already looked into therapy sessions, anger management specifically. If Aurelia agrees, I'll start next week." She exhaled slowly, looking to me for silent support. I offered a small nod. Everyone deserved a chance to redeem themselves, but not at the expense of ignoring the past. Aurelia took a shaky breath. "All right, but I'm not moving back immediately. I need to see real progress." A fragile truce formed that day. Malcolm dropped the lawsuit and Aurelia agreed to monitor his progress in therapy before deciding on any reconciliation. Justine stayed under my roof, going to school and returning every day with a tired but hopeful smile. Some afternoons, Aurelia allowed Malcolm to take Justine out for an ice cream or a quick trip to the park, always supervised, ensuring trust wasn't prematurely given. During this transitional phase, I found myself torn. A part of me still bristled at how easily Malcolm seemed to pivot from hostility to repentance. The cynic in me wondered if it was just another manipulation. Yet I also recognized the relief in Aurelia's face. She yearned for a family that worked together, not one splintered by distrust. She quietly mentioned that the therapy sessions were intense. Malcolm often left them moody but less confrontational. Meanwhile, I continued with my crocheting classes, but now a new sense of purpose drove me. I talked to some of the women there, older women who'd survived rocky marriages, younger ones grappling with complicated relationships. Many recognized the pain in my eyes before I even spoke about my life. Some offered testimonies of healing and forgiveness. Others preached caution, their words blended into a patchwork of wisdom, guiding me as I navigated this precarious path. Every so often, Aurelia would show me glimpses of Malcolm's therapy notes or recount how he broke down crying in session, talking about the pressure of being the breadwinner, his shame at not having the financial means to pay off the house himself, his resentment. She'd shake her head in a mix of empathy and confusion. "I can't excuse what he did to you, Mom. But maybe he's finally owning it," I replied cautiously. "Maybe just keep your guard up until you're sure. Sometimes people revert to old habits when comfort returns." She nodded, eyes distant. She knew the risk as well as I did. With each day, it seemed the family that had been shattered by pride and hurt was slowly piecing itself together, albeit with caution. But no matter how hopeful Aurelia felt, I refused to let my guard down fully until Malcolm proved, not just promised, that he was a changed man. One afternoon, Aurelia and I took Justine for a walk around the neighborhood. We passed the house. I'd paid off the place that had sparked so much turmoil. Aurelia had keys, of course, but she hadn't moved back in. She paused in front of the yard, gazing at the flower beds that had gone wild from neglect. "He stopped tending them," she murmured. There was sadness in her eyes, mingled with yearning. "Remember when we first bought the house? Mom, I dreamed of growing a small vegetable garden, of painting Justine's room in pastel colors. Now it feels tainted, like the good memories are overshadowed by everything that went wrong." I slid an arm around her shoulders. "Maybe in time you can reclaim it, redefine it as a home of love. Again, if that's truly what you want." She nodded, though uncertainty lingered. That's when Justine piped up. "Are we going back to our house soon?" She kicked a pebble along the sidewalk, eyes full of innocent hope. Aurelia knelt beside her, brushing aside Justine's curly hair. "We'll see, sweetie. Right now, we're still sorting out grown-up things." Justine pouted but didn't press further. As we resumed our walk, a twinge of fear struck me. What if Malcolm used the house as a stage to prove his improvement, only to revert once Aurelia and Justine were back under his roof? Could Aurelia truly forgive the damage done, especially his blatant disrespect toward me? Maybe a part of me was being selfish. I didn't want to lose Aurelia again if she returned to Malcolm's side. But more than that, I worried about them falling back into old cycles. That evening, Aurelia scrolled through rental listings. "If I do move on, maybe I need a fresh start," she muttered. Yet her gaze kept drifting to an old photo on her phone, she and Malcolm beaming on their wedding day. It was clear she was torn between the dream of fixing her marriage and the practicality of forging a new life. I decided then that the best I could do was offer unwavering support while encouraging her to value her own well-being above all else, even above salvaging a broken relationship. Weeks passed. Malcolm continued therapy, sending updates to Aurelia, a photo of his counselor's receipt, a short recap of the session. He even wrote me a letter apologizing once more for his cruel words about my hospital smell, for shutting me out, for letting pride overshadow gratitude. The letter felt sincere, yet I read it with caution. Words on paper can be carefully curated. Actions would be the ultimate proof. Slowly, Aurelia allowed him more interaction with Justine this time without me hovering in the background. They'd go to the playground or catch a family-friendly movie. In these small glimpses, Malcolm seemed gentler, more subdued. Aurelia confided that sometimes he appeared haunted as though the enormity of what he'd nearly lost finally registered. One evening after Justine was tucked in, Aurelia said, "He's asked me to come home. He says he's ready to move forward to show he can be the husband and father we need." She let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared, Mom. I want to believe him. But if I move back and he relapses into that angry, bitter man?" I reached over, clutching her hand. "No one can promise zero risk, but you can set conditions. Make it clear if he disrespects you or me. Again, you won't hesitate to leave." Aurelia nodded slowly. "He wants me to come see the house tomorrow. Says he's done something to prove he's serious. Will you come with me?" An image of Malcolm standing in that living room, the same place he once forbade me to sit, flashed through my mind. "If you want me there, I will be," I answered softly. The next day, we pulled up to the driveway. I was half expecting tension in the air, but the front yard looked tidier than it had in months. With freshly trimmed hedges and newly planted flowers, Malcolm stood by the door. Hands clasped, his expression solemn. As we stepped inside, I saw something that jolted me: new furniture. The couch he'd so jealously guarded was gone, replaced by a simpler, comfortable-looking sofa. He noticed my surprise. "I sold the old one," he said, "figured it was tainted by my own pride." Aurelia's eyes welled with tears, and I felt a lump in my throat. Could this be genuine change? "Thank you so much for staying with me through this emotional fireside journey. Stories like Iris's remind us how complex family relationships can be and how powerful it is to stand up for our own dignity and worth." Now, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Malcolm truly changed, or is he simply playing another game? What would you do if you were in Iris's position? Please share your personal opinions and experiences in the comments section. I read every single one and deeply value your perspective. And let me know from where you joined today's fireside chat. If you enjoyed this story and want more heartwarming, dramatic, and insightful narratives, please take a moment to subscribe to her Fireside Stories. Your support truly means the world to me and helps the channel keep growing. Until next time, take care and remember, every story matters. I'll see you again soon by the fireside.